In the underworld of Peaky Blinders, Thomas Shelby never needed to shout to assert his place. He didn't argue, he didn't ramble, he didn't try to convince anyone. When faced with a proposal that violated his principles, he simply gave a look and said one short word: number. No anger, no explanations, no room left for negotiation. And it was precisely that calm finality that made people wary of him, respect him, and strangely drawn to him. In real life, we may not be living in a criminal world like Thomas, but we too are constantly surrounded by offers, expectations, and invitations that deep down we know we no longer belong to. And often, what exhausts us isn't what we say no to, but the fact that we don't dare to say it with peace. This is the final chapter, a return to a skill you may have forgotten, the art of saying no. Not from anger, but from clarity and dignity. Not to hurt others, but to protect your inner peace. If you've ever stared at a message not knowing how to respond, hesitated before walking away from an opportunity that doesn't align with you, or felt guilty for saying no, then this chapter is for you. And if you believe that true strength isn't about winning every confrontation, but knowing which path is worth continuing, then like, share, and subscribe to Stoic App, because sometimes the right no at the right time is the very door to a life that finally feels your own. 1. Rejection doesn't hurt you, your reaction does. There's an image in the Chronicles of Narnia that strikes deep for any man who's ever known the sting of rejection. It's the knight at the stone table. Aslan the lion, who stands for life, honor, and courage, is betrayed, bound, and mocked by creatures too small to grasp his greatness. They rip his mane, they jeer, they dance around him as if they've won. But Aslan doesn't roar, he doesn't rage, he doesn't fight back. He simply stands silent, noble, letting their fury burn itself out, while his stillness becomes the most powerful response of all. He knows exactly what's happening, and more importantly, he knows that dignity doesn't need to be shouted to be real. It only needs to be preserved. We've all been Aslan, though, in more ordinary human ways. You got rejected after a first date, and now you find yourself watching her stories every night, hoping to hear your name again. You pitched a great idea in a meeting, only to be ignored, and spent the entire afternoon in your room, telling yourself you're not good enough. You sent a message that came from the heart only to be left unseen. And 3 days later, you're still rewriting a 3-paragraph reply, unsure whether to send it or delete it. Some people get blocked after an argument and immediately use another account to reach out. Some get left by someone they loved and start posting cryptic stories, hoping she'll notice. But in all of these reactions, what we lose isn't the other person, it's ourselves. Epictetus once said, "It is not things that upset us, but our judgments about things." Rejection is just an event, but your reaction can strip you of your self-respect, your calm, and even the character you once took pride in. The person who hurt you may not be the one who left. It may be you when you decided to place your inner peace in someone else's hands. And that's when you must return to Aslan, not to become cold or numb, but to remember you're allowed to feel sadness, but you don't need to let that sadness control your actions. You're allowed to feel disappointment, but you don't need to respond with spite, with anger, or with any need to prove yourself. You can be still and let your dignity speak on its own. So, if you've just faced rejection, do this. Rewrite the entire story in neutral language. Don't say heartbroken, hurt, or abandoned. Tell the story like you're describing it for a friend without drama. And then observe what happens. You'll feel strength returning. The story no longer suffocates you. It becomes what it truly is, just a situation, and you the one who has already outgrown it. Aslan didn't need to roar to reclaim his power. He simply walked away, and the silence that followed was proof of his presence. And you don't need to send another message. You don't need a reason. You don't need a delayed apology. You only need to keep your dignity and walk away like a man who no longer needs to be accepted, to know he is already enough. 2. You don't need revenge. You just need to not let it change you. In The Dark Knight, there's a character even more haunting than the villain himself, the Joker, and that's Harvey Dent. Once the symbol of justice and hope in a collapsing city, Dent was a principled, fearless, and widely respected district attorney. But then, tragedy struck. The woman he loved was killed. He was betrayed. Half his face burned, and with it, his identity split in two. Harvey Dent became Two-Faced, a man who no longer fought for what was right, but lived only to repay pain with pain. The world doesn't change just because someone is hurt. It changes when that hurt person loses who they used to be. From an ideal of integrity, Dent turned into the very thing he once stood against. Not because he was weak, but because he let his circumstances rewrite his character. And that truly is the greatest loss. Not the person he lost, but the version of himself he once honored. In real life, there's no shortage of Harvey Dent's people who used to be kind, generous, and warm, but after betrayal or manipulation, turned cold, bitter, cynical. They think it's a form of self-protection, but in truth, that's the very moment they abandon their greatest power, the ability to remain themselves, untouched by the ones who tried to hurt them. I once met a man like that. A quiet office worker who was quietly sabotaged by a colleague, someone who twisted the facts in a meeting, nearly getting him reassigned. Everyone expected retaliation, but instead, he calmly presented his evidencino insults. No gossip, no drama. He kept doing his job, even better than before. 3 months later, he was promoted. The other man quietly resigned. That was a victory without striking back. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." In a world obsessed with one-upping and retaliation, the one who keeps his dignity under pressure is the real winner. You can adopt a simple principle. I will not change my nature just because someone treated me badly. Write it on your desk, on your phone, in your mind. And each time you feel the urge to snap back, to prove something, to show you're not weak, read it again. To remind yourself, composure is not weakness. It's strength that has mastered its wounded ego. Because what they truly want is for you to lose yourself. But when you remain rooted in your values, no matter what they've done, you no longer need revenge. Your calm becomes your counterattack. A quiet smile and walking away, stronger than any comeback. Have you ever clapped back at someone only to feel everything get more tense, more exhausting, and more messy than before? Defending yourself is instinct. When you're misunderstood, belittled, looked down on, you want to speak up. You want to protect your dignity. to prove you're not who they think you are. But too often, that very reaction puts you in a weaker position as if you're begging to reclaim your worth from hands that were never worthy to begin with. A middle-aged man wearing old jeans and scuffed leather shoes walked into a luxury car dealership. Not a single salesperson approached. One even smirked and said, "You must be lost, old man." He didn't respond, just smiled, quietly walked around the showroom, then left. 3 days later, he returned with an official letter from his company placing an order for 6 SUVs for the executive team. He was the CEO of a corporation that had just opened a branch in that city. The same salesperson who had mocked him stood frozen, speechless. But the man didn't insult him, just smiled, signed the contract, thanked him and walked away, calm and unbothered, as if nothing had happened. That's confidence without comeback. Because someone who truly understands their own value doesn't need to say it out loud. You don't know his name. The store clerk probably doesn't remember either. But there is one man with that same quiet presence who made history in the NFL, not because of what he said, but because of the calm no one could shake. Tony Dungy, the first black head coach to win a Super Bowl, faced countless attacks, doubts, and racist remarks from the media and critics alike. But he chose not to retaliate. No criticism, no bitterness, just discipline, football, and strategy. When he finally raised the Super Bowl trophy, someone asked him, "Why didn't you ever get angry or fight back at all those insults?" He simply said, "Because that would have meant they won." Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "To live a good life, we have the potential for it." If we can learn to be indifferent to what makes no difference, the older you get, the more you realize. Words can't change everything, but your presence in silence can change everything. Next time someone attacks you just to feel superior, try not responding. Don't force a comeback. Stay silent, smile, walk away like someone who holds the power. Even if they don't understand you, they won't forget that presence. And if you've ever had a moment like that or want to cultivate that presence in your own life, share your thoughts and follow Stoic App. We'll walk this path with you, not to make you stand out, but to help you become someone unshakable. 4. Selective indifference, the strongest response. Why does indifference make someone lose control even more than a slap in the face? Why is it that, in moments of insult, the most powerful reaction is no reaction at all? There's a familiar principle in psychology. The more you try to prove yourself, the more the other person resists. The more silent you are, the more anxious they become, because nothing makes a provocateur feel more defeated than being ignored. That feeling isn't mere disregard, it's a silent statement. I won't waste any more energy on this. And that statement cuts like a blade. This story comes from a friend of Minia, quiet, composed architect, deeply respected in his field. Once, during an internal presentation, he was openly slandered by a former colleague. The man hinted that he copied ideas, lacked originality, then offered vague accusations in front of the entire board. The room fell silent. The tension thickened. Everyone waited for him to respond, maybe deny it, maybe fight back, or maybe walk out in offense. But he simply nodded and continued with his presentation as if nothing had happened. No defense, no anger, just full focus on the work, the strategy, and the things truly worthy of mental energy. A few weeks later, the one who had tried to slander him receiving no reaction, no pushback, no fuel to keep the conflict alive, began to feel hollow. One colleague later shared, "He apologized, not out of fear, but because the silence made him reflect on himself." The ancients weren't strangers to this lesson. Seneca once wrote, "Silence is a lesson learned through life's many sufferings, but this isn't the silence of resignation. It is selective indifference. You know you could speak, could retaliate, but you choose not to. Not because you're weak, but because you're strong enough to not need to prove anything at all." This kind of indifference is not numbness. You can still feel hurt, disappointed, angry, but you don't let emotion dictate your behavior. You preserve your dignity. You let time and character speak for you. That is the kind of response that is enduring and unbreakable because it doesn't fight, doesn't argue, doesn't need to win with words. If you're being drawn into a situation where every emotion in you wants to fire back, pause. Write down 3 things you will now choose not to react to, even if you're misunderstood, even if you're attacked, even if your pride feels wounded. Not because you're afraid, but because you are strong enough to choose indifference as an intentional, dignified response. Because sometimes the only way to make someone reflect on themselves is silence. A silence that has weight. An indifference like diamond hard, cold, but unbreakable. If you've ever experienced this, share the video or leave a comment. Not to vent, but to remind others like you. You're not weak for choosing not to react. You're simply stronger, in a way most people don't understand, and that is Stoicism. 5. Make them ask, why didn't he react? There's a scene in The Dark Knight that chills you not because of gunshots, but because of silence. The Joker, a man who thrives on manipulating mindsets, locked in an interrogation room with Batman. He mocks, he provokes, he digs into psychological wounds. Rachel, Harvey Dent, morals, ideals. But Batman doesn't respond like an angry man. He stays silent, eyes fixed, not because he's unaffected, but because he knows. Reacting is the reward the Joker is demanding, and he refuses to give it. In a world where every enemy reacts exactly as expected, Batman confuses the Joker. Why isn't he exploding? Why isn't he fighting back? When you don't respond the way they expect, you break their control over you. That's a Stoic strategy. You don't stay silent because you're weak. You stay silent because that silence becomes a mirror forcing the other to face their own conscience. Let me tell you another story about Phil Knight, founder of Nike. He once faced brutal betrayal from Onitsuka, his original Japanese partner. They tried to cut him off from the very company he built. It was a blow to the heart of a young entrepreneur who had poured everything into one name, Blue Ribbon. But Knight didn't lash out. He didn't launch a loud lawsuit. He stayed silent and began preparing, quietly, for one of the most legendary counterstrikes in business history. Nike was not born out of revenge, it was born out of quiet endurance. And years later, it was Onitsuka who ended up watching silently from behind. You see, from Batman's interrogation room to Phil Knight's boardroom, intentional silence isn't surrender. It's the tactic of those who know. Reacting at the wrong time can pull you off your path. When you hold your silence, you force others to have a conversation with their own conscience. When you don't respond, you hand them a mirror they can't shatter, they can only face it. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Be like the cliff against which the waves continually break, but it stands firm and tames the fury of the water around it." Don't be the wave, be the rock. No need to strike back, no need to defend, just stand firm, and every storm will dissolve into the stillness of your presence. Next time you find yourself being pulled into a pointless fight, don't reply right away. Ask yourself instead, will my silence right now make them start questioning something? Because sometimes silence is the only way to make someone truly hear themselves. If you've ever had a moment like that, share it in the comments below. Your story might just be the reminder someone needs today before they react the wrong way. 6. Silence isn't distance. It's a return to order. There are moments in life when everything happens too fast. A single message leaves you breathless. One sudden event leaves you stunned. A rejection collapses the entire plan you've spent years building. And your first instinct is always to speak, say something, explain something, or at least affirm, "I'm okay." But then, you can't find the words. You just see yourself sitting there in a familiar room, but everything inside feels scrambled, like a desk after a storm. You don't need to speak. You need to clean up inside yourself first. 3 years ago, a major tech company in the US suffered a dramatic stock crash due to a failed investment decision. The press swarmed. Employees were on edge. Shareholders applied pressure. But what was strange was this. The CEO, who was known for being outspoken, remained completely silent. No social media posts, no emergency meetings, no reassuring emails for 3 full days, just silence. Everyone thought he was hiding, but on the 4th day, he appeared. Same black shoes, grey shirt, calm eyes. And he didn't deliver an apology, he presented a comprehensive restructuring strategy. Clear, concise, no blame. He ended his address with one line: "I wasn't silent because I gave up. I just needed 3 days to hear the voice of reason that my emotions had drowned out." Then, that composure silenced the entire company. In those 3 days, when everyone else had lost direction, he had already restored order. Not on the outside, but inside himself. That is the spirit of Stoicism. Epictetus once said, "The more we value things outside our control, the less control we have. The more you let what's outside pull you, the more you lose the wheel of your own life." And the pause that moment of silence is the moment you take that wheel back. Not because you're numb, but because you understand. Reacting when your mind is still unclear is never a wise reaction. If you've just been rejected, misunderstood, or hurt and rush to respond, stop, not to escape, but to reorganize your inner values. Write down 3 things you still have control over. Turn off your phone, sit in silence, and ask yourself, what do I truly need, and what is no longer worth holding on to? When you can wait until reason returns to the driver's seat, you'll stop reacting from pain and start responding with strength, and that will earn more respect than any explanation ever could. If this chapter reminds you of a moment when you once chose silence to restore your inner order, share that story below. And if you believe that strength isn't found in what we say, but in knowing when to stop, share this video, hit like and subscribe, so that each week you'll have one true moment of stillness for yourself. 7. When you don't react, others begin to reflect. There's a paradox in human psychology. When you react harshly, people find excuses to blame, justify, or continue attacking. But when you stay silent at the right moment, refusing to fall into the trap of words, Your calmness forces them into a conversation with their own conscience. Keanu Reeves once experienced such a moment behind the scenes of an interview. A fellow actor made a sarcastic remark in front of many people, mocking his weirdness and excessive silence. But Keanu didn't respond. No frown, no confrontation. He simply smiled, gave a gentle nod, and turned away, returning to his work. The other man got a brief laugh from a few people nearby. Then the room fell into awkward silence. In the following days, the very man who mocked him came back and said, "I'm sorry, I misjudged you." No one had asked for that apology. But self-reflection began the moment the one being attacked didn't fight back. It may sound hard to believe, but sometimes the less you react, the deeper your impact becomes. Silence, when rooted in integrity and dignity, is not passive. It's a wordless declaration. I will not lower myself to play by your rules. And when you don't respond the way they expect you, force them, perhaps for the first time, to look inward. Stoicism doesn't ask you to endure abuse. It teaches you this: do not let others control your emotional state. They can throw insults, but you still have a choice: react like them or rise above them and walk away with dignity. As Stoic philosophy reminds us, he who angers you conquers you. The one who makes you lose your temper is the one pulling your strings. And nothing confuses a manipulator more than realizing they can't move you. So if one day you're attacked in public, take a deep breath. Don't argue. Don't stiffen up to strike back. Just stand up, hold your head high, walk away in silence. You'll see your calmness will echo louder than any comeback, because the eyes of those around you will speak on your behalf. You don't need to win an argument when your composure is already a victory. 8. Don't ask, "Why did you leave me?" Let them ask that themselves. There are questions that don't deserve answers. And there are people for whom, once they've walked away, your silence becomes the last thing they remember. A kind of pain that doesn't show in tears, but hides in the drafts of unsent messages. A man, a software engineer, spent night after night in front of his screen, typing out line after line. Why did you leave? What did I do wrong? Can't we fix this? The memories were still there, but no one spoke of them anymore. He tormented himself, blamed himself, called his friends, reread old conversations as if he could spot the moment he missed. He thought if he could understand the reason, if he could debug the relationship, maybe his heart would find peace. But she didn't respond. No explanation, no sign of return. Just a void. The more he reached out, the further it stretched. And then he stopped. He deleted the number, turned off notifications, let go of the habit of staring into the empty space she used to occupy. And he started going back to the gym, back to the habits that once made him feel worthy, not because someone loved him, but because he was living in alignment with himself. He arrived at work on time. He started learning guitar again. He no longer waited for anyone. He lived. And somewhere along those slow, steady months of coming back to life, he got a message from her. Not an explanation, but a quiet question. Back then, why didn't you say anything? I thought you'd never let go. This isn't a fairy tale. It's how the world works when you understand, when you go silent at the right moment, not to avoid, but to return to yourself. The other person starts asking the questions you no longer need to. The why no longer reaches outward. It becomes an inward journey. What do I truly want? Am I living in alignment with what I deserve? Epictetus once wrote, "Don't seek for everything to happen as you wish it would, but rather wish that everything happens as it actually will. Then your life will flow well." Don't pray for someone to stay. Learn how to let them go without losing your wholeness inside. The next time you feel the urge to send that "why" message, write it on paper, then burn it. Each time, each word, each wound, and use that space to write a new version of you, someone who doesn't need to be fully understood, to live fully, calmly, and without losing faith in themselves. Because you don't need answers from the one who walked away. You need a reason not to lose yourself. And sometimes, what makes someone regret losing you isn't your begging or your tears. It's the fact that you lived well, stayed calm, stayed silent, and kept walking forward. Those who walk away don't need another question. They need a reason to feel the loss. And you don't need them to explain it. They'll feel it themselves when you're no longer standing in the place where you once begged to stay. 9. Rejected in love. Don't beg. Get busy with yourself. There's something few people ever tell you. One of the greatest motivators behind extraordinary individuals doesn't come from recognition. It comes from rejection, from being dismissed, from not being chosen. For Kobe Bryant, that moment came when he was 17. A promising talent with no real faith behind him. He once had feelings for a girl and she rejected him. She didn't believe he'd amount to anything. To her, Kobe was just a kid, obsessed with basketball but nothing special. Kobe didn't beg. He didn't try to convince her. He didn't send messages hoping she'd reconsider. He simply went back to the gym and trained, quietly, relentlessly. While others were partying, he was training. While people slept, he was shooting in the dark. Not to prove anything to that girl, but to become someone he himself would admire. Years later, after becoming a legend with 5 NBA championships, he was asked about that first love. Kobe just smiled. "I don't resent her. Actually, I'm grateful. Because her rejection is what made me commit fully to what I was born to do." Stoicism doesn't teach you to suppress pain, nor to pretend you're fine. It teaches you to transform hurt into meaningful action. As Epictetus once said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." When you're rejected, in love, in relationships, in a dream, stop chasing explanations. Start chasing the better version of yourself. You can start with 3 simple things. Learn a new skill. Train your body. Spend time reconnecting with your inner calm. Every time you feel the urge to text someone, write that emotion down and use it as fuel to go further. Not to prove anything, but to live with dignity. Because one day, the person who once left you will see you not waiting, not needing answers, but living in alignment with the person you were meant to be. And if they ever look back, it won't be because of what you said. It'll be because you were silent but so alive they couldn't look away. You don't need to make anyone regret losing you. You just need to become someone you're proud of. 10. Don't cry in front of them. Let your growth be the answer. There are insults you never forget, not because they hurt too much, but because you swallowed them. And from that moment on, you started to change. He sat silently at the corner of the table, holding a glass of water. At that high school reunion, the opening greetings quickly turned into the usual questions. "So what are you up to these days? Anything going well?" And then a voice rang out, half joking, half bitter. He still hasn't found a job, probably just waiting for an opportunity to fall from the sky. The whole table laughed. He said nothing, didn't force a smile, didn't push back, just gave a slight nod and quietly excused himself. But that night, he couldn't sleep. Not because the words hurt too much, but because they touched the exact insecurity he had been hiding for months. He felt small, as if he had been stripped bare in front of the people he once called friends. But instead of getting angry or complaining, he opened an old notebook and wrote the first 3 words: small coffee shop. For the next year, he nearly disappeared from the group chats, the gatherings. He didn't tell anyone, didn't share with anyone, but from that night on, every morning, he got up early to learn how to brew coffee. Every evening, he took side jobs to save money. Every weekend, he read finance books, learned how to apply for licenses, researched rental spaces. He disappeared from the chats, stayed away from reunions, and poured all his pain into one direction: rebuilding himself. A year later, the reunion happened again, but this time, not at a restaurant. It was at a small street corner with a wooden sign that read, "Gentle Breeze Cafe." When they walked in, the person who had once mocked him stood frozen, eyes meeting his eyes. He wiped the counter, calm and quietly radiant. No one needed to say a word. But this time, he was the only one smiling. Silence is not weakness. It is the choice of someone who understands. You don't need to cry or explain to be respected. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." Growing in silence is the strongest answer to doubt, to mockery, to contempt, because not everyone deserves a demonstration from you. Silence, sometimes, is the most powerful kind of growth. You don't need to shout to earn respect. Don't need to strike back to restore your dignity. When you patiently rebuild yourself step by step, day by day, your growth becomes the strongest answer of all. Not everyone deserves your explanation, but they will be forced to witness your rise and have nothing left to say. Next time someone belittles you, don't get angry. Don't brace yourself to retaliate. Quietly choose a skill you've long postponed and train it every day for the next 30 days. No need to post it online, no need to tell anyone. Just let your persistence speak every word for you. You don't need to cry in front of them. Let your quiet growth be the only thing they remember when they come looking for you again. If you've ever chosen silence and rebuilt your life alone, share this video as a message for those still searching for that strength. And if you see yourself in this journey, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share Stoic App, where silent transformations become the kind of strength no one can deny. 11. Don't type out that 3-paragraph text to explain, just delete it. How many times have you sat alone at night, the screen glowing quietly in front of you, typing out a long message, explaining, justifying, hoping they'd understand, hoping they'd reflect, hoping the breakup could have a proper ending? You wrote one version, then deleted it, rewrote it, read it over, and then didn't send it. She was a marketing executive, freshly out of a 4-year relationship. She had planned to send one final message to say how deeply she was hurt, how hard she tried, and how she didn't deserve to be left in silence like that. All night, in her quiet room, she wrote the words she had never said. 3 paragraphs, clear, honest, and full of feeling. But when her finger hovered over the send button, something made her pause. A flicker of clarity. A voice inside whispered, if they ever truly wanted to understand, they wouldn't have let it come to this. She exited the chat, opened her notes app, copied the entire message, and saved it in her private journal, then deleted the conversation. The next morning, for the first time in weeks, she woke up early, walked through the park, and felt a small weight lift, not because they came back, but because she had finally come back to herself. There are things that don't need to be said, because saying them won't make someone understand. Sometimes, it only wounds you further when your words are met with silence. Wanting to be understood is human, but if someone has already left without needing to understand, then your explanation no longer matters to them. In that moment, silence isn't weakness. It's the recognition that you don't need to beg for empathy from someone who's no longer listening. Epictetus once said, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." You don't need to write 3 paragraphs to prove you loved deeply. You don't need to prove that you tried. Your calm, your self-respect, and your decision to continue living a beautiful life, those are the strongest proofs of all. Next time you want to write a long message to end things, to explain, to get something back, write it, but not to send. Save it in your journal. That is the right place for your truth, not in a conversation that already ended from the other side. There are small acts like not pressing send that speak volumes about your inner freedom, because you no longer need them to understand. You only need to stop betraying yourself. 12. When you no longer need validation, you become most attractive. There's a paradox about attraction that very few people recognize. The most attractive person isn't the one who gets the most attention. It's the one who doesn't need attention to feel worthy, doesn't need compliments to know they matter, doesn't need recognition to feel free. Zac Efron was once the image of Hollywood charm, muscles, smile, fame. His name was tied to polished, perfect roles that millions adored. But behind the spotlight was a young man lost in the very image the world built for him. He once shared that he lived in constant pressure, trying to maintain an unrealistic Hollywood physique, and slowly lost himself. Every joy, every drive, every emotion was anchored to what others thought. But after a serious facial injury and a long battle with anxiety, he suddenly stepped away from the spotlight. No more parties, no more chasing lead roles, no more perfect body Instagram posts. He moved to a modest home in Australia. Each day, people saw a man waking up early, brewing his own coffee, walking misty hills, and spending evenings writing a few thoughts in a notebook about what he had learned that day. Not for publication, but to understand himself. He focused on healthy eating, meditation, eco-travel, and filming a documentary on sustainability, down to earth. No noise, no performance, no need to prove anything. And then something unexpected happened. Audiences loved Zac more than ever. Not because he was trying to stand out, but because he didn't need to anymore. That's real magnetism. When you're full within, you no longer need to be filled from the outside. The Stoics called this inner freedom, and as Seneca once wrote, "He who is not a slave to others is free." You don't need to chase stares, applause, or relationships to feel valuable. It's your quiet strength, your self-possession, your invisible center that pulls people in ways they don't even understand. Next time you catch yourself preparing a post just to prove something, When you're about to do something just to impress, stop and instead do one small thing for you, just because you want to, not because anyone's watching. Walk in the rain, write in a journal, practice a forgotten skill. Create a weekly, self-commanded schedule where every hour of your time is chosen by you, not to be seen, not to be praised, not to be loved in return. If you're trying to forget someone or still healing from being rejected, stop following them. Start following yourself. Build a new weekly rhythm. Do one thing just for you, not for anyone to witness, but for you to feel your own worth again. A quiet morning, an evening without your phone, a skill you decide to return to. Live for your inner completeness, not for external approval. True attraction doesn't come from who you have. It comes from how you remain grounded, even when no one stands beside you. You're most attractive when you walk through life needing no spotlight and no one to clap. 13. Instead of trying to win them back, let them try to understand you. There is a kind of silence that isn't escape, it's growth. Not because you no longer love them, but because you've become strong enough not to do anything that would cost you your self-worth just to stay in someone's life. And it's in that very moment, when you no longer need to be understood, that others begin to want to understand you. Robert Pattinson was once one half of the most famous couple in Hollywood at the time, and then the whole world watched him get publicly betrayed. The media swarmed. They camped outside his house, asked relentlessly, speculated, dug into his private pain. But he didn't speak. No public statements, no efforts to clarify, no pleading, no attempts to set the record straight. He disappeared from the spotlight for a while, turned down commercial films, chose independent cinema, lived a quiet, artistic, inward life. He was no longer Kristen Stewart's ex. He became a critically acclaimed actor with depth, identity, and quiet magnetism. And then, years later, Kristen, during an interview, spoke about him again, this time not as an ex, but as someone admirable. What happened? He didn't try to return. He made them try to understand him again. In love, or in any relationship, there's a simple truth we often forget. You don't need someone to understand you correctly for you to have value. Epictetus once said, "Be content with being thought a fool, and don't strive to be understood." The more you try to explain, the more you let others define who you are. But when you stay silent and live truthfully, the world begins to question itself. Next time someone walks away, next time someone misunderstands you, don't type out a long message. Don't send an explanation. Don't look for a mediator. Do something else. Live so vividly that they can't help but notice you. Be so composed that they can't ignore the calm in your choices. Be so full within yourself that no one can label you the one who was left behind. Because the one who stepped out of your life doesn't always need an open door. Sometimes they just need a reason to return, and you don't have to say a single word. Just keep walking strong, silent, and let your footsteps speak for you. 14. Not replying doesn't mean you're angry. It means you're busy living a life you're proud of. There are people who used to be your whole world, and yet it was they, through a short message, a cold goodbye, who stepped out of that world. The problem is, they think you'll still be standing there, waiting, always replying, always available. But then one day, they message you again, and this time, you don't answer. Not because you're angry, but because you're busy living a life that no longer needs them to feel complete. He was a 27-year-old man, abandoned by the woman he loved, just as he lost his job and was struggling under the weight of debt. She said, "I need someone with a clearer future." That sentence lodged in his chest through many sleepless nights. For a while, he almost sent her a long message to explain, to salvage, to hold on to something that had once been beautiful, but instead of hitting send, he closed his laptop. And the next morning, he started working part-time as a delivery driver, riding during the day, learning to code at night through free online courses. No one cheered. No one noticed. But every line of code, every delivery on time, every early morning were the silent bricks he laid down to rebuild himself. Almost a year later, he received a full-time offer from a software company. Stable, debt-free, and back to himself. And then she messaged again, "How have you been? I saw a picture of you with your team by chance. You look different." He looked at the message, then locked his phone, because at that moment he was standing on a mountain summit with friends. After his first trekking tripper reward, he gave himself after months of tireless effort. The only answer he needed was the life he was living. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If someone does wrong, the harm is to themselves. Don't make it yours. If someone chooses to walk away, let the consequences be theirs. Don't carry their decision as your burden." Next time you receive a message that shakes your heart, pause and ask, "Is this message worth missing my gym session for? Worth interrupting my work for? Worth sacrificing the peace I've finally built?" If the answer is no, then let your time and your silence speak for you, because you no longer have anything to prove. You've done the right thing, you kept going, and you've grown so much that you no longer need anyone to validate it. If you've ever chosen silence in order to move forward and build a life you're proud of, share this chapter as a quiet confirmation of that strength. And if you're still in the process of quietly rebuilding yourself, hit like, subscribe to the channel, and share Stoic App, where each chapter reminds you. You don't have to answer every message when your life itself has become the clearest answer of all. 15. The art of saying no, preserving your dignity in silence. Some messages don't arrive to open a new chapter, but to test whether you're still the same person. Some apologies don't come from genuine remorse but from loneliness, seeking someone to fill a void. But you are no longer that person. You've walked through heartbreak, through the hunger to be understood, through the exhausting need to prove something. And when they return, you don't need revenge. You don't need a clever remark. You don't need to show you've won. You only need one simple sentence. "I've started over, but not with you." This is not cold indifference. It is the quiet clarity of someone who has become full within, someone who understands. Saying no is not the rejection of love, it is the protection of peace. Like how you've learned to say no to meaningless meetings, no to vague promises, no to shrinking your emotions to fit someone else's comfort zone. In every no, there is awareness, boundary, and self-love. Stoicism doesn't teach you to shut your heart, but to stop opening it unconditionally to those who once broke it. Seneca once wrote, "Freedom is the ability to say no without explanation." And he was right. You don't need to shout. You don't need to justify. You don't need to prove that you've become better. You just need to live a life you are proud of. That is the most powerful no and the most beautiful affirmation. Next time someone comes back, Remember, not every door needs reopening. Ask yourself, does this still serve the values I now live by? And if the answer is no, let your continuation be your answer. Walk forward, quiet, certain, bright, not so they can hear it, but so you can feel it. You've changed. Write down 5 things you will now say. No to a shallow relationship, an old habit, an outdated expectation, and alongside them, write 5 things you'll choose to nourish your strength instead. No one can trap you in the same old cycle once you've learned to say no freely. You don't need to harden yourself to show strength. You only need enough calm to choose what is worthy. Because sometimes saying no doesn't close anything. It opens up a new version of you, wiser, steadier, and no longer needing anyone's permission to know you're on the right path. You don't need to raise your voice to be respected. You don't need to explain yourself to be loved. And you don't need to accept everything just because you're afraid of being left behind. A truly free person is someone who dares to walk away from conversations that no longer serve them, dares to say no to relationships that are no longer healthy, and dares to choose peace over the pressure to please everyone. Stoicism doesn't teach you to hurt others. It teaches you not to hurt yourself by saying yes to things you already know are unworthy. So if someone once walked away because you were no longer easy to control, let them go. If someone was disappointed because you dared to say no, let them be disappointed. Because refusal is not cruelty. It is a sign that you are finally choosing what truly matters to you. If this video helped you realize something meaningful, share it with someone who might need it today. Hit like to support your inner voice. And subscribe to Stoic App, where every chapter isn't just advice, but a step toward becoming someone you can be proud of.